Hi everybody, and welcome to Nerd of the Third Power, your one-stop shop for all things nerdy and awesome. I am your host and master of ceremonies, Dr. Gonzo. With me, as always, on this epic quest of awesomeness is our resident anime goddess, the one, the only, the beautiful, the Cat. Cat, how you doing?
Hello, minions. Greetings.
Okay. Cat is apparently...
I got nothing interesting this week, I'm sorry.
Cat is apparently channeling a deceased supervillain. Alrighty.
I've been watching a lot of Game of Thrones. There's a lot of assholes in that show. It's good times. It's good times.
Almost reminds you of work, doesn't it?
A little bit. Yeah, a little bit.
Okay. And, Brian, you actually have company this week at the correspondence table.
Really? Who is it?
It's us. We're the minions, dummy.
Oh, right.
Yes, John has finally returned after a lengthy absence.
Yeah, I have mostly wrangled my internet connection issues under control. Mostly. There's still one or two last little hurdles to jump, but I think I'm almost good. I think I should be here regularly again. It's
Okay, good. Alrighty. So we got a semi-full boat here. Skyblaze and Brendan aren't with us tonight, sadly. But we got a good fun show tonight. We are wishing Batman a happy 75th birthday. The 75th anniversary was it this month, Brian, or was it last month?
I believe it's last month, but you know, it's an anniversary of a whole year. You can sort of just, you can celebrate it sort of whenever you want, 'cause it's 75 years. Not necessarily to the day, but still 75 years.
Okay.
I think there's actually going to be a Batman Day sometime next month, so there you go.
Besides that, I mean, it's Batman. He can celebrate his birthday whenever he wants.
All right. But yes, we're going to be discussing Batman this week and all his various forms and incarnations. And we'll be discussing his highs, his lows, his creamy middles. But first, we have some questions to go through here for Ask a Geek. So let me just pull out the mailbag here. First question here is from Rick, and it is for John. And the question is, are you a fan of horror anthology shows?
Ooh, now that is a very nice little question. As it happens, I've always been a big fan of anthology shows. Horror, sci-fi. Well, there have been a few more horror ones. When I was a kid, my family, my parents are a little bit on the older side. I don't know if I've ever mentioned this on the show, but we watched a lot of Nick at Night in my household when I was growing up. I think I was more familiar with the celebrities and TV shows of their generation than I was from the ones of my generation when I was a kid, which, as you can imagine, made me so popular in school. But I used to watch things like The Twilight Zone, The Outer Limits, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, all that stuff. And, of course, when I got older, I started watching things like, you know, Tales from the Crypt and Tales from the Dark Side, and there's been a lot of Tales from things now that I think about it.
You know, it's kind of funny that this question came up, because before the show started, me and Brian were talking about Tales from the Crypt, and I don't know if Brian agrees, but I think that they just need to bring the Crypt Keeper back. That just needs to fucking happen.
I couldn't agree more, because I'm one of those weird people. Like, some people look at the Crypt Keeper segments and they're kind of like about it because they don't like all the puns and stuff. But personally, the Crypt Keeper segments were always my favorite parts of any episode of that show. Controversial opinion, I know, but I love the Crypt Keeper.
Man, do you remember the cartoon that they made out of that?
Yes, I loved that cartoon as a kid. And since you brought up the topic of kids' horror anthologies by invoking Tales from the Crypt Keeper, we have to talk about Are You Afraid of the Dark and Goosebumps.
Yes.
Because, seriously, I watched all of that, so I am huge on the anthology horror TV format. I'd love to see it come back.
Man, the Are You Afraid of the Dark intro still scares me to this day. Like I was having one of my late night web crawls, and the only light in the room is my television, which is what I pump my computer display through now. And I found the intro on YouTube, and I watched it. At the end of it, I was like, "Oh man, I just peed a little."
There are a
Submitted
lot
for the
of
approval
people.
of the Midnight Society. I bring you the story of Gonzo's piss.
Truly the most horrifying story of all.
See,
Also, it's worth noting that when I was a kid, Are You Afraid of the Dark did have an episode that genuinely scared me when I saw it.
Oh, I gotta hear this.
I bring this up only because I'm not saying this to sound brave or creepy, even though I am. But there are actually very few things that genuinely scare me very much when I read them or watch them. Every now and then something gets under my skin, and it doesn't always make 100% sense what it is. Like, there's not really any real consistency, just some things happen to creep me out. This episode in question is probably one of the most famous episodes of the series. It's called The Tale of Laughing in the Dark. And the story is about a fun house, a spook house in an amusement park, and it's called Laughing in the Dark. And there's this old legend around the town that this is actually the second version of this house, that the original one burned down because there was this crooked clown who worked for the carnival whose name was Zeebo, and he'd stolen the payroll of the amusement park, but he'd been caught and chased by the police, and he was holed up in the fun house, or was hiding out in it, something like that. And Zeebo had a nasty habit of smoking cigars, and the fun house burned down as a result of it, but it was still allegedly haunted by his spirit. And this group of kids dare another kid to go in because the fun house has a creepy, cheap animatronic clown figure that just laughs and its eyes blink, and allegedly its nose is really Zeebo's clown nose, his original one, and this group of kids dare another kid to go and steal the nose. And obviously, without getting into spoiler territory, you can imagine where things go from there.
Straight to hell.
And people wonder why I don't like clowns. I mean, seriously, this is like another perfect example.
Clowns are fucking evil. That's all there is to it.
The show's like 20 years old. I'll go into spoiler territory. The thing that creeped me out was the kid being stalked by what may or may not have been Zeebo in his own house. It never showed who it was, but it was just the idea of him being home alone, his parents were out for the evening, and there being someone or something else in the house that was like looking for him. And there's one particular bit where he locks himself in his room and you can see the light under the door being blocked by feet on the other side, but it like blows up a balloon, like it sticks a balloon under the door and inflates it, and the balloon just floats up to the ceiling and it just has "Give It Back" written on it. And then it pops on cue.
This is kind of a random aside, but on a laugh, I went looking up Are You Afraid of the Dark in Wikipedia. Did you know that show got a revival in 1999?
Yes, it did. I tried to watch it. It just was not quite the same. I couldn't get into it. It was like, you remember Gary, the one with the glasses who looked kind of like Harry Potter, who was the leader of the group?
Man, I don't remember anything about that show.
Well, I do, apparently.
Which says either I didn't like it, or it was so terrifying that my brain has locked away the memories as a defense mechanism.
No, like, Gary had a little brother whose name was Tucker, who was introduced later in the show, and like, when they did the revival in '99, they made Tucker the new leader of the group to like bridge the gap because everyone else was all new. And then to cap off the entire series, I never saw all of this, they did like this big TV movie adventure that had like the old and new members together, and they were like having to fight off some actual ghost or supernatural entity. I don't know, it was kind of weird. But yeah, the revival wasn't as good, trust me.
Alright. Okay, here's a question here from Sam. And he asked, in regards to the Godzilla film, he asked me if I disliked the film so much, why didn't I give it Brian's rating? Which, for those of you who don't listen to our show all the way through, Brian's rating is simply, fuck this movie. I think sort of the unofficial rule of Brian's rating is that we only give it to films that are, like, offensively bad. Like, it's just so thoroughly terrible that there's absolutely nothing redeeming about it whatsoever. At least that's the impression I got of Brian's thoughts on Kick-Ass 2, but, you know, hey, he can step in and correct me if I'm wrong. But, I mean, there were good parts to Godzilla. It wasn't a completely horrible film. I just thought it could have been a hell of a lot better.
Yeah, actually, some of our fans on the Facebook page were expecting me, when I talked about Amazing Spider-Man 2, to give my rating of that movie, which wasn't true, because I enjoyed some scenes and some things from it as well, so... And yeah, Kick-Ass 2, burning a bin, as Skyblades would say, burning a bin on fire.
It always struck me that Brian's rating was kind of like Roger Ebert with his 1-star or no-star rating, that he only gave that to movies that were not only incredibly bad on an artistic level, but which he found morally reprehensible.
Yeah, I kind of see that, but I don't know. I don't know. I'm not the one who came up with the rating, so Brian is. So if there's any rule to be applied, he's the one who's got to come up with them.
I don't want that kind of power.
I didn't create Brian's law, I just enforce it.
And then his second question is, why is it you rarely, if ever, give movies anything less than a matinee rating? And I think the reason for that is because we really only review movies that we really want to see, and we most of us tend to not go see movies that we think are gonna suck. Like, you know, for example, we didn't go see Wolverine when it came out, I think.
There's a notable exception to that, though, Gonzo, and it was a movie that you insisted that we all go out and see.
Yeah, I was about to say, there was one exception. I made everybody go see Battleship, and I do not regret that in the least. And I'm telling you right now, I'm probably gonna make you guys go see Ninja Turtles too.
You can try, but you will not succeed.
Is John trying to hiss at me, or is his cooling system in his car backfiring?
Little column A, little column B.
I was about to say, last time I heard a sound like that, something fell out of my car. But no, like for the most part, we don't go see movies that we are 100% sure are going to suck. There have been some surprises. I think Green Lantern kind of disappointed us. And Brian absolutely detested Kick-Ass too.
Really?
So.
Did he? I didn't, I wasn't clear on that point.
Okay, next question here is, well, it's marked for John, but it's one that we can open up to all of us. What to you, John, is the most overrated film ever made?
Oh, that's a tough one. Can you come back to me? Because I really got to put some thought into this.
Okay, Brian, what is the most overrated film in existence to you?
Oh, I have no idea what would be the most overrated film. I could piss John off and say Cabin in the Woods.
You could.
I do think that's a little bit of an overrated film. But not the most overrated film.
Because that would have required a lot of people to actually have seen it.
Ouch.
This is weird. I think this is just us stabbing John.
That's what he gets for taking so long.
All right, Kat, what's your answer?
Oh man, see, I have this thing where I don't go watch a bunch of movies that I don't really want to see, and I'm not gonna say that a movie that I really liked is overrated. I feel like I could throw out the name of some dumb fucking comedy, and we would kind of all be okay with that, and then I would get hell later because I've never seen it. But I could say something like...
I've never seen some dumb fucking comedy, if it makes you feel better.
I want to say American Pie.
Really? Not many people go that route. Okay, American Pie, overrated film. All right, I can respect that.
I'm going to say it's overrated. I've never actually seen the entire movie, but it got far too many sequels, and as a flautist, I got far too many jokes in the middle school.
Yeah, I could see that.
Those are not appropriate jokes for middle school.
No.
Oh.
They're not.
Okay. All right. I'll just come out right out and say it. I did not like Avatar, the James Cameron movie, not the Last Airbender adaptation.
Good choice.
I did not like James Cameron's Avatar. I don't understand. I mean, yes, it was technically impressive, but the plot and the characters just didn't do it for me, and I don't understand why everyone in the industry is hailing it as the greatest film ever made.
Hang on a second,
in that same vein, I present to you with Titanic.
I didn't like Titanic either, but that was more because I had a personal vendetta against Leonardo DiCaprio at that time.
Hang on 1 second, though. I'm a little bit confused about something you said. You said the plot and the characters didn't do it for you? There were plot and characters in that movie?
What? That's
And
crazy
therein
talk.
lies the problem.
I just thought it was like 15 hours of giant blue Smurfy cats.
You just went to go see the Naked Blue people, didn't you?
I cannot tell a lie.
Okay, it's official, guys. It's official, guys. John is into Naked Blue people. So now we know what not to dress as for Halloween this year.
Oh my god. Hey, Brian, did you have an answer? Did somebody else want to talk?
No, it's
Well,
it's
John
my
still
turn.
has to give his answer.
It's my turn. It's my turn. All right. I got 3 choices for this. I got the recent one, the popular-ish in nerd culture one, and the popular-ish in film nerd circles one. I'm gonna go in reverse order. For film nerds and for people who like, big important movies and Academy Award, the one I will say is entirely overrated is $1 Million Baby from like 10 years ago or so, the Clint Eastwood and Hilary Swank movie, The Boxer, mostly because I have some rather sizable complaints with the route the message went, the route the movie went, and parts of the message that it was sending. Not all of them, but parts of them. And I feel that the movie kind of forced the issue. Anyone who's seen it will know what I'm talking about. The popular in nerd culture one that I am going to say is entirely overrated is 300. I have some major qualms with that movie, and it kind of started. Yeah, actually, I would also kind of sort of toss Watchmen into that category too, just because Zack Snyder has a few stylistic obsessions that
He loves him some slow-mo.
he loves slow-mo. He just and that whole washed out tone thing. There's some things he should really pull back on, and he just does not do that, ever. But the recent one, and this is the one that's most likely going to get me in trouble with you guys and or our audience, this is a movie that I actually enjoyed, but I still feel is just a little bit overrated in people's reactions to it. That's going to be Pacific Rim.
Ooh.
Gauntlet Throne.
I liked it. I would watch it again. It has not had very much staying power with me.
I admit it can be an acquired taste. And last question here. This one is to me, and it is from Alice. And she asks, as a fellow Alien fan, what are my thoughts on Alien Isolation? I will say that the happiest moment of my life thus far was when the game got a listing on Steam, because that means it's probably going to actually be released. Alien Isolation, for those who don't know what it is, it's basically the alien game that Alien fans have always wanted. Just you, the creature, in a cat and mouse chase, and everything I've seen about this game, it looks like it's going to be amazing. And when I saw the first trailer for it, the developer conference over it, I said, there's no way that this game is going to be published. It is just too awesome to exist. But it looks like I was wrong. It looks like it's actually going to be published. We have a release date. It's this October. So, yeah, this Halloween, Christmas comes early for me. And I think a whole bunch of Alien fans are going to feel the same way. God knows.
It's just Slender with an alien. Like, not to rain on your parade, but I can't get excited about this game because it's a concept we've already seen, just a different protagonist, or I guess antagonist in this situation.
And you know what? Star Wars was just 7 samurai in space, but that didn't make it any less awesome.
Perhaps, but I just can't get excited.
But yeah, no, I'm stoked. God knows our producer is salivating over it. Even as I'm sitting here talking about it, I can see he's frantically trying to put a bucket under his face so he doesn't short out the board with his drool.
Well, that's a pleasant mental image.
What mental image? You can see it through the window. He's right there.
I am busily trying not to look.
But no,
Not working, but I'm trying.
I'm really looking forward to this game, and I can't wait for it. So yeah, that's all the Ask a Geek questions that we have for this week. As always, you can send them to us through the email at billysmith@channelawesome.com or drop them in the That Guy with the Glasses forum thread of the same name. Personally, we'd prefer if you send them to us through the email. It's a little easier for us to keep track of them that way. But yeah, that's all the questions we have for this week. So with that, we're going to jump right into our headlines, starting this week with John. Why don't you go ahead and get us started this time?
Thanks, Dr. Gonzo. We've got a lot to catch up on since I've been gone, guys, so buckle your seatbelts. This might be a long one, or at least a verbose one. So without further ado, let's dive into the movie bin and see what we've got this week. There have been a lot of announcements and shakeups going on in the directorial world since last I was able to talk to you lovelies. Bryan Singer has confirmed that he will be directing the next mutant movie, X-Men Apocalypse, which has also been confirmed to feature Channing Tatum as Gambit. Roberto Orci will be taking over Star Trek III while J.J. Abrams is busy with Star Wars. Gareth Edwards will be directing the first Star Wars spin-off movie, whatever that happens to be. But perhaps the biggest director story currently rocking the geek movie community is not the announcement of someone coming onto a movie, but that of someone leaving it. That someone would be Edgar Wright, and the movie that he is leaving is Ant-Man. You could have knocked me over with a feather when I heard this one. Well, maybe not. I mean, I've gained some weight lately. The official party line about the subject is the standard creative differences, or as the press release actually worded it, Wright and Marvel had, quote, differences in their vision of the film. While there's no confirmation of what that actually means, the rumor mill has been buzzing with stories of multiple script rewrites, and the director's frustration with his personal project being made too generic, and with Marvel Studios' refusal to push back the release date to allow him more time to work. Whatever the case may be, I can't help but find this sad news. Wright has been campaigning for Ant-Man for years, and the project was clearly very close to his heart. There's been no official word yet on what Wright's next project will be, nor has Marvel announced his replacement, but, as always, you can expect me to announce both whenever we do have more news. Moving on from one big announcement to another, Warner Brothers has been dropping a lot of info about Batman vs. Superman lately, including its official finalized title, Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice. Well, I guess they want to make sure we're all aware that this is pushing towards the Justice League, don't they? In addition, they have finally released a still of Ben Affleck in the new Batsuit, which I realize all of you have probably already seen if you have any internet connection at all, and if you don't, just how the hell are you listening to us anyway? The picture is sufficiently broody, so much so that it has spawned a sad Batman meme on the internet, in which the Dark Knight is photoshopped into various tragic scenarios. Of greater interest than the photo, though, is Kevin Smith's commentary on it. While the image makes it look like Batman is wearing standard movie black, Smith claims that, having seen the suit himself, it's actually the black and gray version that the Caped Crusader wore in Frank Miller's famous Dark Knight Returns. Seeing as how it was a quote from that project, which they used to introduce the world to this movie at Comic-Con, that's not too far of a stretch. What might be a stretch, however, is the rumor mill that's being circulated based on a set photo posted to Twitter. A blue bicycle brand playing card partially embedded in the wall. Now, I don't know about you guys, but when I see Batman and playing cards, there's only one word that springs to mind, and it rhymes with poker. Of course, the cinematographer, Larry Fong, who also happens to be the man who tweeted the pic, was quick to dissuade anyone from putting too much stock in the rumors. Still, even if this is all a red herring, he surely can't be surprised that people would read the Joker into a picture like that. Guess we'll have to wait and see to find out what the truth really is. And rounding off things today, there have been a bevy of movie announcements. I'm going to try to keep this quick because we've got a lot of discussion to do later tonight. First of all, as I hinted at earlier, Star Wars spin-off movies are a-comin'. At least 3 of them are being planned by Disney so far, but naturally the House of Mouse is being tight-lipped about what exactly those movies will entail. The most common rumors circulating right now are that Han Solo, Boba Fett, and Yoda are set to get their own movies, but really at this point in time anyone's guess is as good as another's. Let's just hope we don't wind up with a Jar Jar Binks biopic. But hey, as long as we're bringing beloved characters back to the big screen, why stop with Star Wars? That seems to be Lionsgate's logic, as they have announced that none other than the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers themselves are going to be heading back to the big screen. Whereas it's far too early to tell whether this is going to be awesome or a disaster, we can all at least sleep soundly knowing that, at the very least, this one property didn't fall into Michael Bay's hands. And finally, lest everyone think that all of these announcements have concerned nostalgic properties, there is at least one new brand which is set to get the big screen treatment. A live-action version of Monster High. I don't know about you guys, but I'm pre-ordering those tickets as soon as they go on sale. No word yet on whether they'll have a crossover with the Equestria Girls, but based on my unfounded speculation and knowledge of internet fanfiction, I think I can rest assured that this is a thing that will definitely happen, if only in my half-delirious nightmares. And that's it for your movie news. Now I turn things over to my comics collecting colleague for your multiverse headlines. Take her away, Brian.
Well, thank you. And well, here's going to be a real quick tour of the multiverse and my headlines, mainly because it was Memorial Day this past week here in the United States. A lot of places don't release a lot of news, so I really had to scrape the bottom of the barrel here. So much so, I actually don't have any print news, but I do have some news in the terms, at least the television side. We do know that comic book adaptations coming into television within the next year are, well, quite a lot. You have more of the Arrow, more Flash, iZombie, the second season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and also Peggy Carter will be coming to the screens, not to mention Constantine and Gotham on different various networks. But what about the Netflix shows? Remember the Marvel Netflix shows, which are all going to combine into one Defenders-like movie, much the same way as the Avengers, hit its first real speed bump. The writer-director of the series, Drew Goddard, who you will know as the man who brought you Cabin in the Woods, is leaving the Netflix series of Daredevil. It almost comes a day after Edgar Wright's news broke that he was leaving Marvel's Ant-Man. But this seems to be under a bit of a different circumstance. First reported, it seemed like the same situation, but when more information became available, Drew was also tapped to direct and write the Secret Six spin-off movie for Sony. With a big movie in place of a big blockbuster, he had to choose between the Netflix show and the movie. There's a little bit more money probably in the movies, which is why he couldn't take on both at the same time and let it go. The good news is that they already have a new director and showrunner in place in Stephen D. DeKnight, who worked on the Spartacus series for Showtime and also at one point worked on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It was a lot. It seems like bad news when you think about it, but you never really know. There's no date set when we're going to see these Netflix shows, but I expect pretty soon we're going to see some trailers as some of the casting comes available. And guess what? That is literally my only headline for the entire week. Unless something drastically happens and I have to edit this. But it looks like that's sort of it for this multiverse tour. Over to you, Kat, with some anime news.
Welcome to the Anime News Musician Edition. There's quite a bit of J-pop and rock drama unfolding right now, so let's lay it out. Japanese musician Asuka of the Chage and Asuka music duo can't stay out of the news. Asuka was arrested May 17th for drug possession after police found MDMA tablets and powder and drug paraphernalia in his apartment in April. Now Asuka is in the hospital complaining of a headache. Chage and Asuka have previously delayed concerts last year out of concern that Asuka had transient cerebral ischemic attacks, which present with stroke-like symptoms and could result in brain damage. Of course, drug use has been linked to increased risk of TIAs, so there's that. Asuka initially denied the most recent drug accusations and later began an affidavit admitting to usage of illegal substances. Since his arrest, Walt Disney Studios Japan has delayed several Miyazaki Collection Blu-ray and DVD releases that featured Chage and Asuka music. No word yet on his current medical condition. AKB48 idols Iriyama Anna and Kawae Rina were injured after an attack during a handshake event on Sunday. The attacker is 24-year-old Umeta Satoru, who went after the singers with a saw. Both singers underwent surgery for their injuries. Kawae suffered a laceration and bone fracture in her right thumb, and Iriyama fractured her right pinky and took a laceration to the head. A male staff member who defended the girls was also injured, suffering cuts to his left hand. He also underwent surgery. All three were discharged and are now at home recuperating. Iriyama and Kawei will strive to return to normal AKB48 activities, but with a likely up in security. J-rock band Spire has announced that they are going on hiatus after vocalist Ike tweeted that he was quitting. The band was on tour and have had to cancel several concerts. The official word on their website is that Ike has been diagnosed with vocal cord polyps and acute inflammation, which are progressively getting worse. This comes after a recent trip to the hospital earlier this month where Ike was diagnosed with acute bronchitis. For a singer, polyps are not only painful, they usually require surgery to remove and can do worse damage if left untreated. The Spire website states that Ike will take time to recover and they will release more information later. Whether that means they're convincing him to stay is anyone's guess. The other band members have said on their own Twitters that they are not going to give up, and fans and fellow musicians have urged him to talk to his band before he makes that kind of decision. Spire has contributed music to several anime including Bleach, Gintama, Samurai Flamenco, and Haikyuu. In regular anime news, the city of Takahashi in Okayama Prefecture is raising money for a new Tenchi Muyo series. The series, like many of the previous Tenchi series, will take place in Takahashi with the hopes of driving tourism. Once the series, tentatively titled I Tenchi Muyo, airs on Tokyo MX in October, the city will host events and sell merchandise in the hopes that fans will pilgrimage to the area. The town is raising almost 17 million yen, or about 165,000 US dollars, for advertising. Tenchi Muyo creator Kajishima Masaki is from Okayama Prefecture and is credited as creator on the project, with original Tenchi producer Inoue Hiroaki reprising his position for the new series, which will run as 50 5-minute episodes. The upcoming Sailor Moon Crystal anime will get streamed on Crunchyroll. This is good news for those who aren't well versed with the Japanese streaming site Nico Nico, which until now has been the only streaming site attached to the series. So far I've only heard rumor that Hulu and other non-Japanese streaming sites may get the series, and this is certainly a show that commands as many viewing platforms as possible, so I guess more news as follows. And finally, Adult Swim has announced that Dragon Ball Z Kai will be added to the Toonami block this fall. They've not yet announced from what point in the story they will begin airing or what, if anything, the series will replace in the block. They also announced that they will be bringing Cowboy Bebop back to Toonami, so let the fanboying commence. And that's all I've got going on in the anime and manga world. Back to you, Dr. Gonzo.
That's all the headlines that we have for this week. We're going to take a quick music break. When we come back, happy birthday, Batman. We discussed the Caped Crusader, his past, his past. We don't really know his future, but his past and all its many incarnations, the good, the bad, the ugly, and we examine him as a cultural force. So, yeah, stay tuned. We got a lot of fun stuff ahead.
never ever fades away. いつか命尽きてもこの愛を消せはしない。それは永遠に生きるもの。闇を破り時の中で凍りつく幻を追い越した時、虹の彼方愛は待つ。幾千の光が待つ。You get a rainbow, rainbow in your hands.
All right, and we are back. And this week, we wish Batman, the Cape Crusader, a happy 75th birthday. Yay! We would give you a cake, but you're an intangible, abstract concept, so we can't really do that. But,
We can draw him a cake.
yeah. But no, 75 years, that's a good long run for any character to be in continuous existence in some form or another. And Batman has really become something of less a character and more of a cultural force. So we thought this week we would discuss Batman's history and all of his various incarnations, the good, the bad, the ugly, the Adam Wests, and yeah, sort of see where the Cape Crusader's been. So Brian, since you are our learned scholar of all things comic books, why don't you give us a brief background on the origin of Batman, as in when he was created and first appeared in comics, not his origin story, because I think we all know that one by heart.
Pretty much at this point. Well, the origin of Batman is sort of interesting. He first debuted back in 1939 for, at the time, Detective Comics, and Detective Comics number 27. And he was created by Bill Finger and Bob Kane. Now, there's a little bit of controversy there. A lot of people may bring it up, and I'll bring it up now just to sort of get it out of the way, get the controversy out in the open. If you go and look, unfortunately, Bill Finger does not get credited in any of the Batman stuff. Not in the books, not in the movies, not in the cartoons. Unfortunately, the Bob Kane estate, when they made the original deal with the people who were at DC Comics at the time, his father, I believe, was a lawyer and had made such an ironclad stranglehold deal. The only person that gets credit is Bob Kane. Period. Even though Bob Kane is no longer with us in the world, the estate still holds like this just massive chokehold over the company, over making sure Bob Kane is the only person to get credit. But since this is this show, and no one really controls what I can say, I'm going to make sure everyone knows that Bill Finger helped develop and create a lot of what the Batman we know today. So I want to put that out there for everyone.
Okay.
I'm stepping down from the soapbox now. Good clone.
All right. Now, I remember reading somewhere that the Batman stories that appeared in Detective Comics were really just sort of an experiment to see if that kind of character would sell well. Is that true, or?
It is a little bit. It was sort of an experiment because superheroes, they did exist a little bit, but a lot of the times, a lot of the comics that happened back in the 30s and the 40s, they were Western stories or romance stories, horror stories. So you didn't have the superhero genre just yet. And so the concept that Bob Kane sort of came up with, because I will give credit to Bob Kane, he did come up with this concept of having the masked vigilante-like character. The last
Shenanigans! I believe he ripped it shamelessly from Zorro.
Well, thank you for interrupting me, you dick. I was about to say he wasn't the first masked vigilante character out there. Zorro was there first, but since you wanted to come in and take the thunder,
I don't know if I need to take the thunder. There's plenty going on outside my window right now.
Yeah, but at the same time, you had Zorro, but you didn't have like the sort of the big boom, and so it was sort of an experiment, and no one really knew how well it was going to take off. Because I also have to remember at the time when Detective Comics came out, all the comic books were multi-storied comic books. When you got Detective Comics, you got like 3 or 4 or 5 different quote-unquote detective stories. So now all of a sudden you have Detective Comics, and on the front page of this new Detective Comic is a dude dressed like a bat. That's weird.
Wasn't it?
Let's see where this goes.
Wasn't at the time that Batman debuted, wasn't Superman the only character from the company that would eventually become DC Comics? Wasn't he the only one of their characters who had his own title devoted entirely to him?
At the time, yes, but Superman is technically a year older than Batman. He actually debuted a year before Batman debuted. And he debuted in Action Comics, which was sort of the same thing, but his character took off so quickly, they're like, you get your own book, period. It took about, I want to say, a year or so before Batman had the same sort of success, that he got his own book, I believe in like 1940. Like late 1940, he finally got his own book. But yeah, Superman was definitely one of the bigger ones. Also, Captain Marvel / Shazam, who showed up a little bit later, he also gained a lot of popularity at the time. Believe it or not, he was actually more popular than Batman back in the day.
It's interesting that you mentioned that superheroes were kind of a developing genre at the time, because I look back at Batman and some of the other stories that I see in that era, things like radio serials and pulp detective stories, and he kind of, at the outset, at his genesis, he kind of borrows more from a different kind of hero, or maybe even borderline anti-hero, that you don't really see as much of anymore, that doesn't really have quite the same category. They're kind of like a borderline between the hard-boiled detective and like a superhero. Things like the Shadow. I can definitely see the Shadow and his ilk being kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Having a sort of kinship with Batman in terms of development, because it's a dark figure. It's a character who is he's got a secret identity, but he's not flying around and punching robots and having his best friend turned into a gorilla fairly regularly. Pretty sure that never happened to Robin, but don't quote me on that. The Silver Age was kind of wacky.
Robin had his own problems. Let's just put it that way.
But we'll get to that later.
Problems.
Do you think? Well, it's kind of interesting that you mentioned these sort of dark figures. Do you think maybe that one of the things that kind of helped Batman and that concept take off was the timing in which he made his debut? Because 1939, we're in the middle of the Great Depression. World War II is about to kick off in a major way. There's a lot of fear and doubt in the world, and now here's this character who uses fear as a force for good. Do you think maybe that had something to do with Batman's initial success?
I think a little bit, and also at the same time, because we're in the middle of the Great Depression in 1939, the thing I think people forget about is organized crime was also huge. Huge. And, you know, they were based in New York. And a lot of the early villains that Batman faced, like before like the Joker and before Penguin, before all these other rogues galleries came out, the first villains he fought were just goons and thugs of organized crime. And at the time, people who were sort of scared about organized crime, some actually, though some were scared, other people actually, I think, enjoyed it a little bit in kind of a weird way. But to see a guy kind of go outside the system almost, because we all hear the stories of like the corrupt cops being bought off. So here's a guy who sort of exists out in his own little world going, well, these guys are bad, I'm going to stop them. And also the very pulp comic sort of pulp story sort of way, like the Shadow and all of them. Early Batman comics actually had Batman using guns. Think about that for a second. And also purple gloves. I'm not sure why.
Well, it's funny too. It's that you mentioned the using guns, because a lot of his mythology kind of gradually coalesced as he came together. As I was reading the other day, I actually didn't know this one, though I did know about the guns. That the earliest Batman comics were not even set in Gotham City, but they were set in like New York or Chicago or something like that.
What's so funny is that a lot of early writers, you kind of look at the world it is now with like Marvel and DC. You're like, wow, a lot of the guys seem to be based in New York, because a lot of the guys who came up with these characters lived in New York.
Yeah.
So they wrote what they knew, and they knew New York. And yeah, so like Gotham really wasn't a thing until a lot of the things that really I think made Batman really popular didn't happen until much later. But there was still just enough of an interest and kind of neat new character, new spin on sort of vigilantism that people stayed with him for as long as they did. When World War II hit, every single company that could made a superhero. Didn't matter what kind of superhero it was. It was some superhero. There was a lot of patriotic superheroes that came out from this. And I guarantee you can't find them now. They're gone. They've all sort of faded from existence, except for Dynamite, who loves to every so often bring some out to try to create a universe that fails horribly, but they're going to try it again eventually soon. This time Warren Ellis is going to bring all these old superheroes back. So that's going to be fun or a mindfuck. I'm not sure which is going to happen first.
They don't have.
Well, with Warren Ellis, it might be a little bit of both.
Yeah. So it was that kind of lightning in the bottle, just the right concept with the right time. And the people were sort of really willing to read it and put it together. And a lot of that came from the writers and the artists that sort of followed up with Batman a little bit. Because once Bob Kane sort of became successful, he let everyone else sort of do the work for him. I don't mean to speak ill of Bob Kane, because there's other people who do, but he owns the concept, but a lot of the things that made Batman successful, he doesn't own. And so I hate to go back to my soapbox, but I just want to put that out there again.
So basically he pulled an Edison, is what you're saying.
Yes. And thanks to the internet, we now kind of have the information to give, at least, even though we officially can't do it because their state, like I said, has a stranglehold. At least we can get the knowledge out to the public, because you can't really stop that.
It's interesting that you mentioned the organized crime and stuff like that, because I was remembering while you were talking that nowadays comics are so very much associated with the superhero genre that the two terms are practically synonymous with each other in the average layperson's imagination. But really, up until the Comics Code was instated, the most popular comic books were crime comics and horror comics. The superhero comics they still sold, but they were not nearly as much popular as things like crime stories or Tales from the Crypt, since we were talking about it earlier. And I think that actually helped
that's very true.
popularity. Yeah, and I think that also has helped Batman's popularity, because he kind of has a foot in both worlds. Even a lot of his supervillains did not quite start out as much like that, as much as they were drawing off of like the Dick Tracy tradition. I think I remember reading that was actually part of the inspiration for the Joker's appearance, because when he was first introduced, there was no explanation given for him having the white skin and the green hair and everything. It was just kind of presented just as he was. They didn't give him an origin story with the chemicals until years later. And that drew off of the tradition of Dick Tracy villains all having bizarre deformities that tied in with their names, things like Prune Face and Flat Top and stuff like that.
Absolutely. And weird bit of trivia, the Joker was actually never supposed to survive his first encounter with Batman in Batman #1 that came out in 1940. At the end, Batman was supposed to, like, because Batman doesn't kill, even in the old comics he never kills, but I always tell people when they're like, a lot of times when people get into arguments like, Batman doesn't kill, and I said, no, Batman doesn't kill intentionally. He's let some fuckers die.
Oh no, and let me tell you, and I've read some of the early first Batman comics. Dude's got a fucking body count. He would straight up kill a guy if it came to it.
Yeah,
The
that
early
changed
ones back when he was
way
carrying
over the
a gun.
years. Yeah.
But by the time they gave him Robin and Gotham and Commissioner Gordon and all that, they had decided not to let him kill anymore. As for the fight with the Joker, if I recall correctly, he actually tries to stab Batman, and Batman, like, blocks it, and his hand flies back, and he accidentally stabs himself.
Yeah, I think that sounds right, just because it sounds ridiculous. It almost sounds like the Joker, too. It's like, I'm gonna get... God damn it.
Yeah, it does! and then he starts laughing about it. Because even that early on, and they were gonna let it go at that, but then they just added, like, this really hasty panel at the end where there's a doctor who's like, this man's going to live! And,
someone said, this character needs to stick around. Like, we don't know who said that, but someone said, no, we're gonna keep this character.
He could come in handy, so he could come in handy for a comeback someday.
Yeah, so think about that for a while. Like, we almost got the Joker almost just, straight up died when his first appearance, and he may have never shown back up again, because that was before a lot of, like, death come back, the comics are now. Back then, it was like, that guy's dead. Alright, goodbye.
Sucks to be him.
Let's talk a little bit about the Joker and how he's evolved, because when he first showed up, I mean, he was a clown, pure and simple. I mean, he didn't have much of the menace that he does today.
I don't know that I'd say that. Have you read his first appearance? It's
now when you say the first appearance, you mean Batman the Man Who Laughs?
No, I mean Batman #1 from the 40s. In his
very first one, okay.
Yeah. See, the thing is, both the Joker and Batman have kind of changed with their times. When the Joker made it onto the scene, and Batman too, but since we're talking about the Joker, it was as you mentioned, it was the Depression. There was corruption everywhere. Everyone was broke. Everyone was miserable. There was a world war looming on the horizon that we were doing our best to stay out of, but we're gonna get dragged into no matter what.
But the Japanese threw us a nice little party in Hawaii, and we decided, you know what, we got to get in on this.
The Joker, in his very first appearance, he basically he's playing this little game of wits with the police where he announces he's going to steal some valuable object from some millionaire, and that the millionaire in question is going to die. He's going to steal the object. The first one is a diamond. He's going to steal this diamond at midnight, and I think the name of the guy was like Henry Claridge or something like that, will die at midnight. And he announces this on the radio because he always loved attention even back then. And the police are guarding him, and they're like, it's getting close to midnight, there's no sign, and when the clock hits midnight, they're like, well, he's safe, the Joker didn't show up. And then Henry Claridge, he starts laughing uncontrollably, and he falls over dead, and his face pulls itself into the big rictus grin. And they're like, they rush to the safe, and they find out that the diamond in the safe is fake, and there's a Joker playing card under it. So right from the beginning, that was how he was portrayed. He was portrayed as a brilliant thief and murderer. But he kind of lost that edge around the 50s and 60s, because Batman also kind of lost his edge. Because, it was a slightly more, I think of the 50s in particular, were a somewhat more optimistic time, and they may have been kind of, they kind of got uncomfortable how grim and dark some of these characters were. So they kind of retooled them. So, you know, Batman was running around doing like parades and making public appearances, and he was like this jolly civil servant almost. And the Joker became more about the gimmicks and the wacky themes and the ridiculously oversized props and stuff like that, and having stories about making his own utility belt that has things like joy buzzers in it. And
This is also about the time we got the Adam West Batman series.
yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Well, it's a lot of the changes that sort of took place was mostly because the Comic Code Authority
oh, that's true. I should have mentioned
had their
hissy
decided
fit.
to have their way with basically saying, hey, this crap is bad. It is poisoning our children's minds.
Seduction
So
of the
you guys can no
innocent.
longer make it. And when all sort of the dust settled, we lost a lot of we lost almost all the horror comics. We lost a lot of the
did.
crime comics.
We did.
I think we've all lost a lot of the romance comics because they might have sex. Ooh, whatever.
I still remember that one thing from Seduction of the Innocent where there was a picture of a comic panel of like a picture of someone's neck, and like I forget the name of that guy who threw the hissy fit and who wrote Seduction of the Innocent. His name is right out of my head. But he had an actual panel of a woman's neck, and he had like this one part zoomed in and cropped out, and he was claiming that there was like a secret nudity, like a naked body hidden in her neck, like it was a subliminal message. And I just stuff like that. It was a really ridiculous concept, but he managed to convince a lot of people that he was right.
Yeah, and so when that sort of happened in the 50s and 60s, a lot of different weird mandates sort of started taking place, which is why the Silver Age kind of got very strange, you know, and very silly almost in a lot of places, because you had they were trying to appease this new authority because they don't really want to lose anything, because you see a lot of like a lot of the crime comics and things that couldn't happen. A lot of the other older superheroes from the 40s, they all started disappearing because they couldn't survive in this. But Batman and Superman and like Wonder Woman that came later, they survived because they were uber popular. But then you saw a lot of weird changes. You know, like Batman and Robin couldn't always just hang out together, and that's kind of gay. So here's Batwoman and Batgirl.
Oh,
No, if we're gonna go talking about the weirdness of Batman, let's go whole hog. Let's talk about the one villain who had eyeballs at the end of his fingers.
Oh, I'm trying to remember his name. Was it?
Let's talk about that kind of shit. Let's talk about Batmite.
What about
Hey,
Polka Dot Man?
Batmite was least entertaining as shit, just because he was the same as Mr. McSpicklick. I think I said it right.
You want to try that again?
I
I
don't
was about to say,
think
you
there
want
is
to
a
try
way to
that
say
again?
that right.
Mix a spitlick.
Mr. fucking.
No, I give up arguing trying to pronounce his name. I just call him Mr. Cat-like typing detected.
Yeah, but he was Batman had his own version, so every so often he shows up and like, hey, and now you're a sheep.
You know, this is diverting a little bit, but I'm convinced that the name Mr. Mixes, whatever that guy's name is, just came up. The guy came up with a character design. He's like, all right, I need a name. There's a typewriter, and he just slammed his fist down on the keys. Whatever it comes out, that's his name.
I was always like the old Scrabble game, just like crap. Well, that's a good name.
It's a word in the fifth dimension. Or, yeah, it is the fifth.
We'll just add Mr. in the front of it, so people know it's an actual person.
But
thing.
we also got some of the more memorable stories out of the 50s and 60s for Batman, like the Joker fish story.
Actually, that was the 70s.
Well, shit, shows how much I know. I'm just gonna go sit in the corner and not say anything, because apparently I don't know fuck all.
But no, you do bring up something I thought, like, at least in other media, because that's once the 50s and the 60s, especially, well, actually mid-60s, 66, that's when we got our Adam West Batman, which is actually not the first live-action Batman.
No,
it's
well,
not.
there was an old black and white serial version back in the 40s, wasn't there?
There was 2 serials back in the 40s. One, I think, about 44, maybe the other one was like 49. And so, like, you had those are really hard to find too. Like,
Now, I
They
actually
recently released them on DVD.
yeah, I was going to say
Yeah,
I
but I
have
still
one
can't
of
find those.
I have one of them on DVD. I bought it when I worked at Blockbuster ages and ages ago.
that's an old
I-
sentence.
I don't, yes it is. I don't find them difficult to find, but I do find them a little difficult to watch.
Well, it all like that was. I think the reason it's because it was sort of the character was barely 10 years old, and so we're going to make a serial out of him, a la Flash Gordon, because that was a big thing that came into play. Flash Gordon's Radar Men from the Moon. There was a couple of others I just can't think off the top of my head.
There were tons, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like we're going to get on this. So they made 2 of them. I guess they vary in quality. I actually have never seen them, and it makes me a little bit sad. Because I want to see him to say, hey, okay, I saw them, this is how they are. But it would take until 66 until Adam West came along. And it's so funny because like there was a time, I guarantee you, maybe around the 90s or so, we all there was a lot of like people who looked back on the Adam West series. I'm like, this is crap, it's too silly, blah, 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 blah. Rage. This is before the internet, so people just had to walk the streets yelling rage all the time.
I remember those days.
But you know what? Because I'm not that old, and I believe was it like Nick at I want to say Nick at Night might have, like they used to rerun it.
There's so many changes.
Fucking loved the '66 Batman, just because it was so because it was, I think it was one of the best comedies ever made. And you know how you could tell something's a great comedy? When all of the actors and the stories are played completely straight.
See,
like,
that's the thing. That's the thing. There are 2 reasons why I think a lot of people disliked the 66 series. One is, of course, because it was silly and they wanted it to be serious. And it knew that it was silly. All the characters played it straight, but the series knew. The series itself was in on the joke. The other reason why I think some people didn't like it is because it reminded them of how silly some things in the comics, especially in that era, actually were.
I think it was actually the other way around. I think people looked at Adam West at the TV show and thought, this must be completely indicative of what the comics are like, and therefore, because this is silly, I will not in any way give the comic books a chance. Like people do today.
This is also possible.
A little bit, but at the same time, like, it came out in '66, and that you still had the Silver Age going. There was, you started to get a little bit of the start of like different relaunches and things like that. Like different characters started showing up. Marvel started really introducing actually a lot of different characters in the '60s that were, I guess you can consider them more quote unquote mature at the time.
Like Ra's al Ghul. Didn't he show up around that time?
I think he was also 70s.
Possibly. I'm not really. I don't remember his debut as much as I remember some of the other debuts. Because he might have shown up probably closer to the 70s. But the point is there, yes. And it was late 60s, and when you're getting into the 70s, things in the comics were getting a little bit more quote unquote serious. People began to realize the Comic Code Authority actually didn't have a lot of power, so they started sort of, all right, we can start to do this, and we can start to do this again, and all right, Batman's, they make him a little bit darker, and you have different stories. The Joker's going out to put, the toxic smile on people's face, which still creeps me out to this day.
Oh, it's the creepiest thing about him.
Yeah, so I liked the 66 because it didn't necessarily take things so seriously, and it just was a good time to sort of watch it. And yeah, you do have a point, especially later when that period of the late 90s or early 80s, late 90s, where things really started getting sort of, we wanted this to be taken seriously. Why do we still show this stupid show? It's like we show this stupid show because it's fun to watch.
Well, it's also important that I believe that there were some things that the Adam West show did first that were later integrated into the overall Batman mythology. Like, I still remember reading somewhere that, the jet engine on the back of the Batmobile, I still remember reading somewhere that was started in the Adam West TV series. That prior to that, the Batmobile didn't have that.
I want to say that's correct, because the first Batmobile was just a car with a face on it.
Yeah. And
every Batmobile sort of after that kind of resembled that first car. And I want to say it probably was the 66 Batman that said, let's give him an engine to make him go a little bit faster, and so we'll speed up the camera to make the car go a little bit faster. But yeah, every single Batmobile afterwards, like, you can't imagine it without some weird weird jet engine sticking out from the back of it to make him go faster.
I know two specific things that the 66 Batman series did do that have had long-term repercussions, positive repercussions, I would say, for the Batman universe. One is that they changed the name of the villain Mr. Zero to Mr. Freeze. And two, they were the ones who said, hey, we should have another female hero character on this show, and went to DC to talk about it, and they kind of concocted the idea of the Barbara Gordon Batgirl.
Really?
Yeah, this is technically the second Batgirl, because they had a Batgirl before this one.
Yeah, Katie Keene, wasn't it?
Yeah, Batwoman's niece or something like that, wasn't it?
Yeah, Betty Kane.
Yeah, but
I remember that for some reason.
They were the ones who said, hey, we need another girl in this show, and they helped create Barbara Gordon Batgirl. They really, truly did. That is probably the single best contribution that they ever made to the DC universe, right there.
Well, that and the jet engine on the Batmobile.
I feel like eventually, and maybe, I think at the same time, I think this is when he started, this is when a lot of the big, I don't know, maybe this is not true, but when he started naming everything Bat something, may have also came from the TV show. I have my Batarang, my Batmobile, my Bat Cave, my Batcopter, my Bat Plane, my Bat Cookies, my Bat. Wait, what was that last one? The Bat Cookies actually showed up in this fucking Scooby Doo. Yeah, the Bat Cookies showed up in Scooby Doo's, like, the crossover they had.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
One of their first. Or
I remember that actually.
Yeah. And Shaggy and Scooby were like, "Wait, Bat Cookies?" I'm like, now you're fucking drawing the line of what you believe.
See, oh man, and wasn't there also an animated Batman series too around that time?
Yeah, there was some.
That I remember. I remember there was at least one, because he did it in the Scooby Doo show, and he did it at one other place too. But they had Casey Kasem do the voice of Robin, and I cannot fucking take that seriously, because every time I hear Casey Kasem's voice come out of Robin, I expect him to be like counting down the American top 40.
Well, back in 68, 69, there was the Batman Superman Hour, which was produced, I believe, by Filmation.
I believe you are correct.
Yeah.
There was a Filmation Batman, and the Filmation Batman is the reason why the Joker was not a member of the Legion of Doom on Challenge of the Super Friends.
Yeah, I was trying to remember exactly why that was. So you had the Filmation one, and yeah, you were right, Casey Kasem was, because voice acting's amazing. I'm going to put that out there. So yeah, Casey Kasem was Robin. He was also Shaggy in the Scooby-Doo movies. So there are scenes where Casey Kasem is talking to himself.
It's okay. It's happened to the best of us.
It's happened to the best of us. But yeah, but it's so, because he got that also got repackaged, I think, later on as his own show. But I don't remember exactly how long it lasted, because it lasted, I think, for maybe a year, and then they reran it as Adventures of Batman, probably for another year, and then Batman, in terms of animation, didn't show back up until the Super Friends series started up in, like, what, 74, like mid-70s when that started.
Yeah, it's like there were a couple of different. I also remember, I'm not sure when exactly these fit in on the timeline. There were also these really, really cheaply made shorts that featured Batman and Superman. They were the kind of animation where it's barely animation at all, and they had, like, I used to have a collection of these on tape when I was a kid. No idea what year they came from, but they were done by someone other than Filmation and other than Hanna-Barbera. Someone with even less money, if you can believe that. And, excuse me. And, yeah, so there were those, and then it was pretty much the Super Friends in various incarnations ran up until the 80s. And then there was pretty much no Batman cartoon until the animated series in the 90s.
Pretty much, there was sort of a drought for a while, at least in other media, because the comics, it was still going pretty strong at that time, especially in the 80s, because you had like Denny O'Neil sort of take over, and Neil Adams drawing, Denny O'Neil writing, and I think it's one of the better times for Batman is because that became where, the seriousness sort of the character started to come back into play. A little bit darker stories, a little bit, expanding out the rogues gallery a little bit more.
And then along came Frank Miller, who blew the top off of this bitch.
It's so hard to talk about Frank Miller nowadays, to be quite honest. Because, one, I will say this. Yes, he added some great deal to Batman. Batman Year One, which was the year, the story of like how he became Batman, why he became Batman, where was he, how did he get trained, blah, blah, blah. And what the idea of Batman was going to be from basically that point forward is a fantastic book. He also made Dark Knight Returns, another pretty good book. Then he made the second sequel to that.
And we're starting to
good.
think, and the rest of the world started to think that there might be something in this guy's Kool-Aid.
And then he made All-Star Batman and Robin.
Well, no, that was.
Then we knew for a fact we always kind of realized, hey, Frank seems to be out of his mind, but it's that crazy good out of his mind because he comes up with these great stories. Then he became shit. He's out of his mind. Period.
Even in The Dark Knight Returns, even in that, there are one or two things that have always made me go, what? Like I never fully understood what was the deal with those strange little like dwarf kids that the Joker had with him that were they were alive, but they were also bombs and like rocket dwarfs. I never fully understood what was going on with that.
You can.
I'm pretty sure someone probably has like the explanation. I don't, because I had sort of the same reaction, going, "What the fuck is this?"
I also want to know why that one suit made the Joker gain like 200 pounds.
Oh, that's because Frank Miller draws people with giant shoulders all the goddamn time. I swear, people he draws people like when he wants, he's like, they have to be big, so they have to be shaped like triangles. Like, I don't know why he does that.
Well, we'll just write that off to artistic quirks.
I just know that up until that final battle, that was the most dapper looking Joker I had ever seen.
Oh, the white suit and everything.
Yeah, and he's not really smiling. He's just kind of got this look of smugness on his face. It's not really until and you just kind of look at this like, this isn't the Joker. This is just a stuck-up businessman. And then the punches start going and it starts cackling. It's like, okay, yeah, he's back now.
Yeah, basically. So in the comics everything was still going pretty all right, but then there's always a fear, I think, for anyone who writes any sort of superhero, any sort of character, that people will forget who they are. Batman, Superman, like Wonder Woman, they've been really good about staying really in the people's eye for a lot of different things. Because in the 80s they decided they want to bring Batman back into live action, which was the Michael Keaton movie.
Which I still hold as one of the better superhero films ever made, and I will fight the man who says otherwise.
Which is so weird, because Tim Burton doesn't like comic books. He's gone on record in saying he doesn't like comic books. So for him to do Batman, it was like, well, this is weird. But then it's Tim Burton. They're like, all right, let's see where this goes.
Yeah, Tim Burton doesn't like comic books, but he does like money.
Yeah, of course he likes money.
It's also notable that this is before he developed his threesome with Johnny Depp and Helena Bonham Carter.
This is also true, yes.
Yeah, because it was Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson.
Yeah, well, that's a very different mental image. There's a it's interesting because he wasn't really a very known quality in Hollywood at the time. I think the only feature-length theatrically released movie that he had before Batman was Pee-wee's Big Adventure at that point. So the studio, Warner Brothers, was really taking a big chance by putting this project in his hands.
I want to know how that meeting came down. I want to meet the exec who looked at Tim Burton and said, here's a man whose only film to date that has been released theatrically was about a 35-year-old man-child tooling around America in search of his bike with vaguely pedophilic undertones. Let's have him make a superhero movie about Batman.
Yeah, and there were a lot of people who were very upset about Michael Keaton's casting in that role. they couldn't see it, they couldn't picture it, because he was mostly known for comedies at that point. Oh, speaking of which, I take it back, there was another Tim Burton movie that preceded Batman, and that is Beetlejuice.
Again, where's the connection?
Well...
The Joker, that's the only connection I can get, is he put a lot of his creativity from Beetlejuice, like, and I will use the Joker, because he's the Joker.
Yeah, I mean, nobody was upset at Jack Nicholson's casting, because everybody was basically like, well, he's just playing himself. But
well, this is also
now
the
other case is that at the time, Warner Brothers was way more concerned with Superman.
That's
the
true.
Superman the movie came out in 1978. Oh, please be right.
I think you're right.
But yeah, and it was, you know, that was a big success, and they were making that a franchise. And it's a weird switch when you kind of look at it now, because Batman is kind of the character they want to really, you know, they keep a tight control on. They want more now, but back in the late 70s, early 80s, it was Superman who was all in the control.
Mm-hmm.
So when they sort of like, yeah, we're going to make a Batman movie, we'll give it to him, probably not really thinking, you know, because like, yeah, we'll make it just to make it, because, you know, it might make some money. If it doesn't work out, we still have Superman in the back to fall back on. But, you know, weird history happens, and it was a hit, and spawned off 3 sequels.
one of which was good, the other 2 less so.
Well, Batman Returns was good, but it's also one of my votes for one of the most bizarre superhero movies ever made. Like, bizarre takes on a mainstream superhero character, because that was the most Tim Burton-y of Tim Burton's 2 Batman films right there. Because, you know, he had like Oswald Cobblepot being raised by penguins, and Catwoman being licked back to life by alley cats, penguins with
somehow
rocket
getting
launchers.
magical lives out of it.
Yeah, penguins with rocket launchers. I mean, it was a strange movie when you look back at it.
I'm sorry. I'm very disappointed that you're talking about all this weird stuff in Batman Returns, and nobody has said nothing about the giant rubber ducky coming out of the middle of town square.
Why? Don't
Am I
you
the
have
only one who
of
remembers that?
Don't you have one of those in your city?
I do have a Riverwalk, and we have real ducks. I've yet to see a giant rubber ducky.
Must be a Louisiana.
I must miss those days.
The abiding image in my head, aside from Kim Basinger who played Catwoman in that movie? Was it Kim Basinger?
No, it was.
Or was she the
Michelle
woman in the
Pfeiffer.
first one?
Michelle Pfeiffer.
Michelle Pfeiffer. Yeah, okay. Yeah, is Michelle Pfeiffer
It was
and
Vicky Vale you're thinking of.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of. Okay. The 2 abiding images I have of Batman Returns are Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman, sexy Catwoman, and the giant rubber ducky. Because the only thing every time I watch that movie, I'm sorry, I can't help it, but every time I watch that movie, I watch Batman Returns, and that scene starts up, I start singing Rubber Ducky, You're the One. There's all this dramatic music. People are milling about and giving their dramatic gas, and I'm over here just going, Rubber Ducky, you're the one. You make Batman lots of fun.
You know, I haven't seen Batman Returns in a very long time. I really kick myself for missing this opportunity, but I had to miss it because I was working at the time and couldn't make it. There was a theater, one of the smaller independent theaters at one of in one of the towns I used to live in, that in anticipation of the release of The Dark Knight Rises, played every single live-action Batman movie that has ever been made, one a night. Starting with Batman the movie from the 60s with Adam West, going through Batman, Batman Returns, Batman Forever, Batman and Robin, Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, and then The Dark Knight Rises. All of them. And they had like...
quite a film festival.
I know, right? And they had like one ticket. You could buy them as a bundle, or you could pick and choose, but if you went for the bundle, you're like, you know, every night just go see a different Batman movie. And just bring as much alcohol as you can when it comes time for Batman and Robin.
Now, something else, before we touch on some other incarnations of Batman, is sort of around this time that someone in DC Comics got the idea to strike up a friendship between Batman and Superman, which
Well, their friendship existed mostly into the Silver Age. Miller killed the friendship with Dark Knight Returns because he hates Superman for some god unknown reason. But they still had sort of a friendship in the comics a little bit, not as well put together. This is the where they sort of started the mutual respect friendship, where it was like, I don't like what you do. Well, I don't like what you do, but you're still a good guy, and you're still a good guy. Can I borrow some money? God damn it, Clark.
Can they share an apartment without driving each other crazy?
But no, it's like
what actually was happening at this point in time was what I call it was the evolution of the side characters, because at this point in time, what was happening is that Nightwing had sort of Nightwing debuted a little bit earlier, but Dick Grayson, who started as the first Robin, he grew up and said, well, I don't want to be Robin anymore. I want to go out and do my own thing.
Which
he became
I want to ask,
Nightwing with a humongous disco collar.
I remember that.
And he started up the Teen Titans. And you still had Batgirl running around, and this is when we started the series of getting new Robins. This is where Jason Todd came into play.
And then promptly exited.
People hated Jason Todd. People still hate Jason Todd to this day. I've sort of let it go.
Well, you were but a babe in arms when Jason Todd showed up, I think. But
yes, it was.
But before we go into Jason Todd, I'm going to go back to Robin a minute, going into Nightwing, and ask how that came about. Because one of the big complaints I hear about comic books nowadays is nobody ever ages, nobody ever grows up, and it's kind of like, and it's really kind of true, and it was even more so back in the day. So taking Robin and actually aging him up and having him move out, A, where did the idea for that come from in reality? B, how did they handle that in universe?
Well, even going before that, it might be worth talking about where Robin.
Well, I think because what happened was that the Justice League of America sort of debuted around in the 60s, and that became, because it's all of the big superheroes together all at once saving the day, and they sort of want to replicated that, and they kind of replicated it with Teen Titans. And the original Teen Titans actually had Dick Grayson as Robin, and you had Wonder Girl and Aqualad, Speedy, which was Green Arrow's sidekick. And so at the time when that sort of came out, like that, they said, like, well, this is kind of cool. But I want to say it was probably Denny O'Neil. His name shows up a lot with Batman, and I think he needs to get a lot more credit than he does. He sort of thought about, like, well, if we sort of return Batman to his darker roots, what are we going to do with Robin? Because Robin's not really a dark character. Have you seen him? He's Robin. So it sort of came from that kind of conversation. It was like, well, what if we have him grow up? We send him off to send him off to university or whatever, and we can sort of have him a separate sort of strip going for him, and then we'll just have him start the Teen Titans all over again. But this time they're all a bit older, and we can have him be his own character. It came about as sort of branching out franchises originally, and also trying to, I guess bring it. You could say, well, he was trying to bring in new readers. That's what we say now. But at the time, it was definitely going. They saw it more as an evolution of this character. If Batman's going to go darker, Robin needs to be a little bit lighter, and to do that, we need to get him away from Batman.
It's also worth noting, I think, that they probably were becoming more conscious at that point that their audience's age was growing too. Because in the Silver Age, in particular, they were pretty much assuming that all of these were being read by youngish kids. But by the time the 70s rolled around, they knew that teenagers were making up a huge part of their market at this point. And that's one of Marvel's strongest suits, actually, was how much they were appealing to teenagers. So I can kind of see a decision to let Robin grow up emerging from that as well.
But yeah, and that's where Nightwing sort of came from, and he's sort of been stuck in that after college life now for
30 years.
Yeah.
But he doesn't have the giant collar anymore.
No, he doesn't have the giant collar anymore.
Still no wings, though. I'm kind of calling false advertising on that name.
Every so often someone gets this idea. Like I remember reading one of the stories that like he jumps off a roof and he was like, and he extends arm and like he had like glider wings, like those parachute
Oh
things.
yeah, that's right.
But like no one ever kept them. They sort of appear when he kind of when people remember he has them. He's like, he's falling. How come he's not using his glider? Oh right. Oops.
It's in the shop.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where it shows up and then sort of it's Optimus Prime's trailer. He transforms, it disappears.
All right. All right. Now, going back to Jason Todd, this is actually, didn't they actually open up the phone lines for votes on whether or not they would keep Jason Todd?
I kind of remember this, but yes, because it was the Death in the Family story, which is actually a really good story, despite this gimmick that was sort of attached to it.
I think I know.
Where you in the back of the book, at the time where you see Jason, the area where Jason Todd was beaten with a crowbar and exploded, there is the famous the 900 number. Call this number if you want Jason Todd to live. Call this number if you want Jason Todd to die. Now, to everyone's credit who could afford a 900 number, Jason Todd's death was only barely above Jason Todd lives. So he did have some fans, but he had more people, he had more contractors than fans. So Jason Todd died. And this started the trend of Batman never being able to keep a Robin around.
I've heard people speculate that it's possible that DC rigged those votes themselves. That maybe the gimmick was just to make people think they were involved, and there was never any chance of him surviving at all. But
they were pulling a Joe Quesada before there was a Joe Quesada.
Yeah, or they
the only problem with that theory is that Dennis O'Neil, the guy who wrote the story, he's the one that talks about the results all the time, and talks about when he used to go to, there's a great interview somewhere, I wish I could find it, where he was talking about the story, and he went into a butcher, and he had a Batman pen. And the butcher looked at him and was like, "Oh, what's that? A Batman pen?" He's like, "Oh, yes, I work and write for Batman." And the butcher stood up and goes, "Hey, this guy's the guy that killed Robin!" It's like, shit.
And you see, the other thing about that is that when people heard it reported that Robin was dead, most of them didn't know that it wasn't Dick Grayson they were talking about.
Yeah.
Most of them didn't know there was a new Robin at that point.
I think
it's one of those. It's a great story. I think it's a great like side story to the actual book. And there's new versions out, I think now, where you can go read it, because it's actually not, like I said, it's not a bad story. Besides the weird ass gimmick attached to it at the end.
Well, then there's also the Joker becoming the ambassador to Iran, which ruffled a few feathers, but that's a discussion for another table.
Yeah.
It was a different time.
It was a political satire. It was way weirder back then.
But now, I sort of want to. No, we'll say that for later. All right. So we've had the Death in the Family. We've had the movies. So now we're going into the 90s. And
the 90s,
which to me, for me, is the golden age of Batman because of one man, and that would be Paul Dini.
Don't forget Bruce Timm. Don't forget Bruce Timm.
Don't forget Bruce Timm.
Wait, who was the writer?
Well,
they both were.
They both were.
Paul
right.
Dini did a lot of the writing, a lot of the scripts. Bruce Timm is the one responsible for the look of everything.
Yeah. So,
but it was a collaboration between the two of them. That's why it was really good.
So Brian,
because in the 90s, Batman was stagnating because he wasn't as popular. They tried to do the No Man's Land, and I am the one of the few that thinks that No Man's Land worked great if it was way shorter.
Wait,
No Man's Land was too long of a story. Not No Man's Land. I'm thinking. Well, yes, No Man's Land could have been shorter too, but I'm thinking of Nightfall.
Oh, Nightfall.
Where Bane broke Batman's back, and then and that was the debut of Azrael as the new Batman, and that didn't go over so well.
I always felt that Nightfall was kind of a gimmick story. I always felt that Nightfall was kind of like DC trying to recreate the same media attention that the death of Superman got. But that was just me.
There's a little bit to that, but at the same time, like I said, Nightfall, like, interesting concept, weirdly executed at places. We sort of remember it for the wrong reasons. So in the 90s, Batman's popularity was waning. It was sort of, it wasn't going as well. But then, Bruce Timm and Paul Dini said, well, what if we made a cartoon? Because we hadn't had one for like 20 years. And Warner Brothers, to their credit, said, all right, we had Tim Burton make a movie. We can let you guys make a cartoon. Which is literally how it went. Like, the only real reason, Paul Dini and Bruce Timm have said several times, if it wasn't for Tim Burton's Batman, this show probably would never gotten greenlighted.
Oh, I'm sure.
So what was the magic the magic of the animated series that made it such a because Batman the Animated Series, let's just be totally honest, that pretty much set the standard by which all future Batman media would be judged, or at least the animated cartoons would be judged. So what made this show so spectacular that it's held up as the paragon of all things Batman?
What they did was, I think, they never came out and said it, but they made it sort of a period piece. Because if you look at all the cars, you sort of look at some of the technology, not all of it, because some of it was actually really advanced. But they took Batman backwards a little bit in time, and they said, okay, we have to. Things have kind of everything else Batman has gotten literally over the top. So we're going to take a sort of grounded approach. So by taking this sort of grounded approach, they were able to sort of make Batman a person again, not necessarily the costume crusader, but a person. So Bruce Wayne was a person again, and he was fighting. What did they go back to? Some of his characters were mobsters. They took sort of the best of Batman's beginnings, dusted off, gave it a fresh coat of paint, and sort of let it loose onto the world, and it resonated quite well.
What they really did with the animated series, and Brian's right about this, what it was a distillation of all the different aspects of Batman that had made him appealing. He was serious and driven and grim, but not completely and utterly absorbed by everything, especially as Bruce Wayne. He could still smile and laugh, but even made a couple of quips and laughed a few times as Batman himself, as I remember. And Brian's right, it had a lot of the aesthetic of the old era. I believe the actual term that they coined for the look of the architecture and the cars and the scenery in the series was Dark Deco, was what they were going for. Dark Deco. And they actually painted their backgrounds on black paper. Instead of going for white and making things darker, they went for black and made things lighter. But the other thing they did was they kind of combined different aspects of some of the characters. Like we mentioned earlier, the Joker started out as a homicidal thief, kind of a psychopath, or a sociopath. Then he evolved into this playful trickster. And then around the 70s and 80s, they turned him into this completely unstable, dangerous, murderous psychotic. And the animated series was kind of notable for kind of sort of blending all of those different versions of the Joker into one character. Now, in the earliest incarnation, he was never actually allowed to kill anyone. If you pay close attention to those episodes, you'll notice that anyone who falls off of something is like caught by a tree or something like that. There's always a brief clip showing that they're okay, and when the Joker uses his Joker venom, no one actually dies from it. They just laugh uncontrollably and have that face. No one got to die until Mask of the Phantasm, essentially, and until the later revival of the animated series on Kids WB. When the style changed, but the Joker, he had the wacky schemes and the weird gimmicks, but he still had the the murderous edge to him at the same time. Even though he couldn't actually kill anyone in the show, he certainly tried. He tried his best. There was an episode where he stole an atom bomb and was planning to blow up all of Gotham with it. He was fully planning to murder a lot of people. But he was still funny at the same time. He still had a genuine humor about him, as sick and twisted as he was.
Because he was played brilliantly by Mark Hamill.
He was played.
That's very true.
Who I did not realize did the voice. Who I did not realize that I did not know that was Mark Hamill until like 10 years later. I was like, oh my god, Luke Skywalker is the Joker.
My parents and I watched this show together when it debuted because they're both big fans of Batman as well. And my parents have this thing of always wanting to see the voices of the characters. So since animation credits go by, and since animation credits are the second fastest moving thing in the universe behind the speed of light, we would.
Well, don't forget the credits for game shows.
Granted, but nobody cares about those. But we would record these because we'd want to go back and watch them later, and they'd always pause during the credits to see who was the voice of who. And I remember the first episode that aired with the Joker. It was Joker's Favor, was the first one that actually aired. And we were thinking, that's a pretty good Joker. I wonder who did his voice. And we get to the credits and we pause, and all three of us, in perfect unison, like it was a sitcom moment, go, Mark Hamill!
And the other thing that was really good about the series is they expanded greatly with the Rogues Gallery, because in the comics, Joker always sort of got he still does a lot of times too. He gets the main spotlight. So sometimes people forget Two-Face and Clayface and Penguin and Killer Moth. Actually, I'm not sure anyone remembers Killer Moth.
I remember him.
But in the series, they gave these characters fresh, new personalities. You know, the Penguin was more of a mobster this time around, kind of harking a little bit back to the '60s.
And a faux intellectual. He was really big on his sophistication. Never using a two-syllable word when a five-syllable one would suffice.
Yeah, I was always playing it clean. I'm just a business owner. I just own this club. Sure.
But there is no character, in my opinion, who benefited as much from the animated series interpretation as Mr. Freeze.
Mr. Freeze, like, that show gets the credit to basically putting Mr. Freeze on the map.
Didn't that episode win an Emmy?
Yes, it did.
Yes, it won an Emmy. Like, because Mr. Freeze beforehand was Mr. Zero. He was a dude in a suit who liked to freeze things.
Yeah, he was basically like a Captain Cold knockoff.
Yeah, so Bruce and Paul had to sit down going, well, we want to use him, but let's try this. And showing the freedom they had on the show, where you get the origin of he was a scientist and his wife was dying of this disease and he tried to cure it, but he, everything happens. It backfires. Because his motivation, in a way, was noble. I want to save my wife, but I'm going to do it any way I can. And that's where the line sort of gets drawn with Batman. It's like, I understand what you want to do, but you can't do it like this. And, well, you need to shut up because you've never lost anyone. Oh, really? Let's add up our playing cards here.
Yeah, don't try and have a personal tragedy dick waving contest with Batman, because he'll turkey slap your head clean the fuck off.
Fun fact about that Mr. Freeze episode: the guy who played Freeze's boss, the one who was essentially responsible for his transformation by pulling the plug on his wife in the first place, voiced
also
by
Mark
Mark
Hamill
Hamill before he was cast as the Joker. Because, do you know who they originally had cast as the Joker?
No.
The memory was Tim Curry.
It is Tim Curry. Tim Curry was the original Joker, but true story, they thought he sounded too scary.
I would agree with
Well, have you seen Rocky Horror? Tim Curry's a scary fucking dude.
No. The word you're
So we're like,
looking for.
listen, I'm sorry, Tim. I'm sorry. We're going to go with someone else. But I hear Peter Pan and the Pirates needs a Captain Hook. He's all right.
Well, all right then. As I do my horrible Tim Curry impression. It was from Batman the Animated Series that we got the whole DC animated universe.
Yes.
Which that kind of takes us on a tangent. But then, we had the awesomeness that was Batman the Animated Series, and then the next Batman cartoon kind of threw some people off.
Are you talking about the Batman?
The Batman, which not a bad title.
Actually, I completely forgot about that. I was talking about Brave and the Bold. I completely forgot about the Batman.
You completely forgot about the Batman?
Yeah.
Like I said, what threw a lot of people off with the Batman, and I still think it's a great title because of originally when Batman was first showed up on the scene, people, like the bad guys, would call him the Batman because they didn't really, is he a man? Is he a bat? What is he? He's the Batman. So having the show called The Batman, I thought was like, all right, that's kind of cool. But they went a different style,
very different style
of animation, threw little people off, and then they sort of took a lot of the characters, that got really hyped up and really well put together, like Mr. Freeze and the Joker and like Clayface. In the animated series, when you got to the new series, got toned down or got their kind of cliched out, while trying to make other characters like Firefly try to be more complex of a character. I'm like, no, Firefly is an arsonist. That's, who is Firefly? He's an arsonist. He set things on fire. Period.
I see what they're trying to do with this. It's a very earnest but misguided effort, and this was also one of the many problems with the most recent, very short-lived cartoon Beware the Batman.
Yes, very much so.
What they want to do is they see certain characters, certain villains in particular, like the Joker, getting so much attention and so much spotlight, and they say, well, they're getting overexposed. We need to put some more attention, some more focus on the lesser-known villains. Like, we need more Firefly, we need more Killer Moth, we need Professor Pig. That's what America wants. And...
Well, truth be told, because Professor Pig came, they used, the Grant Morrison version,
yeah.
So it actually wasn't a bad representation of what the character was, but I'm sort of sitting there and I'm going, well, I know this character, and I know other fans that know this character. Here's my problem. The people they're aiming at their show at, like, the people who are supposed to be, the younger audience, or at least the teens, I guess, don't know this character.
See, that's the thing. People watch these shows because they do have certain expectations, and one of those expectations is we want to see the Joker. It's a simple, inescapable fact.
I'm pretty sure they had it in mind. Like, listen, we're going to hold off on them. We're going to wait on them. We're going to bring them out, and then everyone will be happy. But they forgot the idiots that ran Cartoon Network at the time. Were like, no, you're canceled. Like, what the fuck?
See, if they
we're not even going to show the rest of your season.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
It is kind of dumb. I will say that.
Yeah.
But yeah, the going back though, the Batman radically reinterpreted some characters. Like the Joker was this barefoot, almost gorilla-like acrobat, and the Riddler stole his hair and looks from Marilyn Manson, and there were a couple of characters that just got really reinterpreted, and a lot of people were put off by that, majorly, seriously put off by that, and I admit to being one of them. Maybe it was unfair of me. Maybe I never gave that particular Batman cartoon a chance because I didn't like the way everyone looked. But I heard it was actually a pretty good show. Like, okay, I will cop, I did watch the Batman vs. Dracula because of course I did. And I did enjoy that, so maybe I should have watched more of the series. Actually, that was a very surprisingly gruesome little movie, given what it was. I mean...
Yeah, well, direct-to-video movies, they gave it a little bit more leeway.
Well, I mean, the Joker gets turned into a vampire by Dracula, and he becomes like one of his servants. And there's this really surprisingly creepy scene where he's stalking Batman in like at like a blood bank. And Batman manages to distract him by like breaking a whole bunch of jars of blood, and it's just like splashing all over the place and raining from the ceiling, and the Joker is just like crazily reveling in it. Like he's got his head tilted back and his mouth open to catch as much of it as he can, and he goes into like this giggling, feeding frenzy where he's like rolling on the ground and licking up every drop of it that he can. And Batman's just kind of looking at him in disgust and horror.
I wouldn't say it wasn't a bad show, but yeah, it didn't get a fair shake. Batman, going back to Gonzo, Batman Brave and the Bold, when it first started, it did not get a fair shake at all from a lot of people, because Batman Brave and the Bold is the Silver Age. Period. It's the Silver Age in animated form. And a lot of people kind of like, this is, it's Adam West all over again. It's being silly. It can't be silly. It has to be serious. It's Batman. But even then, first off, it's a great show. Everyone should watch it. It's a fantastic show.
I agree.
But it's also one of the more darker situations I've ever seen, even in terms of the original animated series, because they decided to add one little tidbit to his origin. You want to know what it was?
What?
Guess the day that his parents were killed on.
His birthday?
The day.
His birthday?
Nope.
Christmas?
Nope. Christmas.
Oh, are you kidding me?
I went through this whole episode because it was like the Christmas episodes and everything, and he was teaming up with Red Tornado because Brave and the Bold is supposed to be Batman teaming up with other characters.
Right.
And he was teaming up with Red Tornado, and Red Tornado doesn't understand Christmas because he's a robot. Yes, I said robot.
I wasn't going to say anything, but I was thinking it loudly.
And like he's trying to teach him, and it's flashing back to like a Christmas that he had with his father. He didn't quite get the present that he wanted, but to make it up, his father took him out to see a movie. And then the last thing you see of this episode is them exiting the theater, and then you hear the gunshots. I'm like, this is the darkest thing ever.
Oh my! I never saw that episode.
I didn't see. Yeah, I'll tell you. See, the thing is, it wasn't the script writing. I'll just confess. This is what bothered me the most about Brave and the Bold. It wasn't the script writing. It wasn't the animation. It wasn't that he was teaming up with all these characters. Although, goddamn, that episode with Aquaman, holy shit!
Which one?
Aquaman is the best.
It was the fact that the voice of Batman was motherfucking Oswald. It was they had Oswald from the Drew Carey Show do Batman, and I'm just like, no, I can't take you seriously anymore. You should be telling jokes about why the French don't wash to Ryan Stiles.
I can see where that could definitely draw a lot of lines. Weirdly enough, Kevin Conroy was actually in the series.
Yes, he was.
So was Mark Hamill. I think Kevin Conroy was the Phantom Stranger, and Mark Hamill was the Spectre. And they both shared, like, they were both in an episode together, and I was just remember watching, listening, going, "This is just weird."
There is one moment from The Brave and the Bold that I do love, and it's one that our first comic book guy Travis turned me on to, and it segues brilliantly into our next section of this discussion, and that was the episode where Batmite was kind of screwing with the show. And he's giving a Q&A at what's supposed to be Comic-Con, and a fan who bears a striking resemblance to one of the creators of the animated series complains that this isn't his Batman, and Batmite pretty much goes, "No, fuck you. Batman has had such a rich history that he can be interpreted pretty much any way we want and it'll still be true to the source material."
And then
keynote. If you are you thinking the same thing I am, John?
It pans across the crowd who is applauding this, and the camera stops on two cosplayers in the crowd, one of which is Paul Dini, the other of which is Bruce Timm, and they are dressed as Harley Quinn and the Joker, respectively. And Bruce Timm says, "Meh."
And so this sort of brings us to sort of the capstone of this conversation, and that's that Batman has had such an enduring popularity. He's almost like a cultural icon, like you said Superman was when we did our Man of Steel review. And I guess I want to ask, why do you suppose that is? Why do you think Batman has had the staying power that he has had for 75 years?
Every sort of decade, they've sort of added a little bit of layers to Batman, or they've sort of changed them up in how he acts, and it sort of fits with whatever sort of like era that it's in. The Batman now that exists in the New 52, I think, for better or worse, does sort of represent a lot of like what society is. And society is very dark right now, and we're very cynical. And Batman sort of represents. We feel more connected to Batman because he's a guy. He's a person. He's a dude. Yeah, he's a quadbillionaire, zillionaire, gazillionaire who can buy all this stuff. But deep down, he's still a person. And he still has to sort of sacrifice a lot of his personality to get through a lot of things. And I think people sort of connected with that and sort of stayed with that. He goes through his dark and brooding phases when the world sort of feels dark and brooding, and he goes through his happy phases when people are a little bit more optimistic about things. And he has a nice middle ground when we just want to sort of sit back and enjoy ourselves. And because he's a person, I feel like that's why he gets more versatile, he gets a longer length in terms of how people find him popular. Because like I said, I love Superman too, but I don't. The next person says I can't identify with Superman because he's a godlike character. I almost punch you in the throat. Shut up. But at the same time, there's a lot of people who feel that, and because like I said, Batman's human, people just sort of connect to him again. And there have been situations where I really wanted some vigilante justice.
I know the feeling.
Like my first year when I moved down to where I am now, in the Southwest, my car got broken into twice, and within a year. I came from DC. No one ever touched my car in DC. I moved down south. I was going to rob you twice. And you get vulnerable. You lose money. You lose your stuff. You kind of want to do the jump out from the shadows. Goes, don't worry, I'll save you. Chase the guy down, punch him a few times, and return your stuff. There's something about that. That sounds morbid when I say it out loud, and I realize that now. But it's something I think a lot of people sort of deep down feel.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. As you were talking, I kind of got an insight into it that I don't think I've had before. And I think this tells a lot about both the characters and why they resonate with some of them resonate with more people than others, and why some may be more popular in one era than another. I feel that Superman kind of represents the ideal. He kind of represents the way we want the world to be, the way we wish the world could be, the way we deep down inside feel the world should be. Whereas Batman represents what we believe to be the reality. Now, I don't mean the reality in the sense that there are actually, crazy homicidal clowns running around giving people permanent grins, or there are green ladies with red hair who can control plants. Nothing like that. I mean, the kind of grim state of the world. All the messy criminal underbelly and all the corruption and duplicity, two-facedness, if you will, that goes on in it. And I think maybe that is the key to his continued success. Maybe even the key to why he has been, over the long term, more popular than Superman. Because some of our ideals have kind of shifted over time. Some of that whole truth, justice, the way we interpret things like truth, justice, and the American way has changed a little bit since Superman's inception. Not 100%, but some of the perceptions of it have. And I think with Batman, he changes to fit the time, but he's always more of a realist than Superman as a character ever will be. And I think that appeals to a lot of people.
Okay. So, Brian, do you have anything to add to that?
No, that was great.
Okay.
I just want to say before we get into anything else that I may need to head out before too much longer.
Well, we're getting ready to wrap up.
Okay, just making sure.
Okay. All right. So, we pretty much covered all the topics that we can. God knows that's not all the Batman there is under the sun.
Oh, Lord.
We'd be here all fucking week if we decided that. So, but in that spirit, why don't we? What are some Batman stories? They could be from comics or TV or whatever that you think people ought to check out that might not necessarily be very well known but are still quality reading. So, Brian, why don't you start first?
Well, I'll give you two. One is normal, and then one's a Elseworld title. And Elseworld titles are like the what if sort of titles. There's a story called Batman Strange Apparitions. It's by Stephen, I think, L. Hart, Len Wein, and maybe Walt Simpson. I'm really sorry if I mispronounced your name, sir. Who did the artwork for it?
Like he listens to this show.
He's not. You never know. It's not very well known because it deals with. It's a Hugo Strange story. Hugo Strange is one of the first people to find out that Bruce Wayne is Batman, which kind of shows you. It also proves the point that that the comic book civilians are dumb. But that's a discussion for another time. What it is, it also introduces a love interest that a lot of people won't remember as Silver St. Cloud, because she also figures out. His identity through this, and then breaks his heart, which is cool because she gets up with Batman and then fucks off. She doesn't die; she just leaves. It's great. Someone that gets close to Batman that doesn't die.
It can happen. You heard it here first.
Yeah. And what it is, it's from the 70s because it features a lunatic Hugo Strange going after Batman because he comes back from the dead, like comic characters do. And he brings back the Joker, and they both sort of try to create more dead coming back from said dead. This is also, if you see a picture of Hugo Strange dressed like Batman, except for the mask, it comes from this story. The second story, the Elseworld one, is actually one I think you might enjoy a little bit, John, is Batman Gotham by Gaslight.
Oh, I've always wanted to read that.
Yeah, this is the one that's set in the sort of the Victorian era. It doesn't change a lot of how Batman's parents were still murdered. He sort of still is like Batman, but the ability to have him sort of in a different time period and going out to fight, I don't think they actually say it, but he's basically chasing down Jack the Ripper. Is sort of this great sort of way you can see this character exist in sort of a different way, a different era, and that's what I love about Elseworlds. Elseworlds are great.
Okay.
Most of the time. Most of the time.
All right. Well, I got a couple that I want to give shouts out to. One is pretty famous in the comics community. One you might not have heard of. The well-known one is The Long Halloween by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale.
I knew you were going to say that, which is why I didn't say it.
Well, thank you. But it's a great book. Runs through the gamut of most of Batman's well-known rogues gallery and tells one of his earlier stories. I would almost go as far as calling it the sequel to Year One. Definitely a brilliant book. The other one you might not have heard of, it's actually a manga by Kiya Asamiya called Batman Child of Dreams. And it sounds stupid on paper. Oh, a Batman manga. Oh, that can't possibly be any good. It's actually really, really well done and a really refreshing change of pace for people who want something kind of out of the norm for Batman stories. I'm not going to give you too much of the plot because I don't want to spoil it. But if you can find it, whether it be online as a digital comic or in your local library or in your bookstore or through less legal channels, definitely check it out. Like I said, Batman Child of Dreams. Definitely check it out. It's a great story.
I will actually say this. They released, it was probably long ago, they released in a giant-sized book the whole collection of the Batman manga that actually took place during the 60s and was based off the Adam West series in the United States. I actually own this book. I got it at a used bookstore for, I shit you not, $7.
Oh.
Original retail price is $34.99.
Oh, you lucky.
I just went in and I said, It's the Bat manga. Because it's not Batman or Batman manga. It's the Bat manga. And I said, I must have it. I don't care how much. $7. Wow, that's a really good deal.
It comes
they
home with
obviously made
me.
a mistake, and I'm going to take it to the cash register before someone finds it.
He pulled a Dork Towers Igor. It must be mine.
Yeah.
As he brandishes his money in the air. Okay, John, what about you? Any particular Batman stories that you think are worth checking out?
I'm going to go a slightly different route here, because both of you mentioned comics, and I know that I'm the movie guy, but if there's anyone out there who hasn't seen the Batman movies, whether the Tim Burton or the Christopher Nolan ones, which I can't believe in retrospect didn't come up in this conversation, but you've all seen those already. So I'm going to go a very odd route. I'm going to talk about prose. I'm going to talk about written fiction. Funny enough, I actually forgot, as Gonzo can tell you, that this was our discussion topic today, but I've been rereading some anthologies of Batman short stories, coincidentally enough, recently. And I came across two stories that have always stood out in my mind as really, really memorable and really disturbing. They're both Joker stories. I'm going to say that right now. As a matter of fact, the first one doesn't even have Batman in it. He doesn't even make an appearance. But I unabashedly love the Joker. I know he's the most popular of Batman's villains, and he's possibly overexposed, and especially in the wake of Heath Ledger, it's, you know, everybody probably gets tired of hearing about it, but he's still my favorite. He has been since I was like 3 years old, and he always will be. The first story is called Definitive Therapy, and it's by a writer named F. Paul Wilson. And that's the one that doesn't have Batman in it at all. It's just a story about the Joker and his newest psychiatrist in Arkham Asylum. And it's almost kind of like it's kind of a case study of just how manipulative and deceitful and incredibly intelligent the Joker is, and how he can just kind of get inside your head and turn things around on you, and completely the doctor goes in intending to psychoanalyze him, and in the end winds up basically getting completely played for a fool by him, and worse than that. I won't go into any spoiler territory except to say that it is really creepy and really disturbing and really worth reading. The other one is called Masks, and it's by a writer named Garfield Reeves Stevens. And I should mention, incidentally, both of these stories have probably been collected in different anthologies. There are a whole bunch of different short story anthologies out there with Batman stories in them. You could probably find these in a couple of them. But Masks is a story about the fears, or rather the chief fear, a fear that Batman and the Joker both share. Which is interesting because in recent years in the comics, it's kind of become in vogue to depict the Joker as not having any fears. I believe when Jonathan Crane, when the Scarecrow tried to use his fear toxin on him at one point, I think it was even in Nightfall, it had no effect. And, but I've never really completely bought that, even with the Joker. I've always figured there might be something he was afraid of. And this story delves into what it is, and it's a mutual fear that the two of them share. And it's just a very interesting story in that sense. It's very, very surreal in a couple of ways, and you don't catch all of the details in it until you've read it more than once. But those definitely come highly recommended for me. I've read them both a couple of times now, and I've enjoyed them both every time that I've read them, and I'm sure that I will think of several other short stories like that I could mention as soon as this episode is over, but I'll just throw those two out there.
All right. Okay, so yeah, like I said, that's pretty much all of the time that we have this week to discuss Batman. If we were to discuss everything Batman, we'd be here until the cows came home and went to bed. But that's about all the time we have for Nerd to Third Power this week. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. We'll see you next week. As always, I'm Dr. Gonzo.
I'm Cesar Romero.
And I'm Mark Hamill.
And I hate you both. Kaka, play us out.